Hi, my name is Jason and I love to cook. No, seriously, I'm obsessed with everything food-related. New recipes, unusual ingredients, kitchen experiments. That's my passion, my personal drug. But you know who else shares my culinary obsession? My mother-in-law, Eleonora. Yes, you heard right. My mother-in-law, who most men envision as a grumpy old lady, turned out to be a real kitchen goddess. When Lisa, my wife, and I first started dating, I was terribly afraid of meeting her mother. I thought, that's it, I'm done for. Now she'll start nitpicking, criticizing like, you're not looking right, you didn't give the right flowers. But reality exceeded all expectations. On our very first meeting, Eleonora and I struck up a conversation about food. It turned out we had a bunch of favorite dishes and chefs in common. And when I let slip that I love cooking myself, bam, it was love at first sight. I mean, the mother-in-law's love for her potential son-in-law, don't get any wrong ideas. Since then, Eleonora and I have been inseparable. We'd spend hours in the kitchen conjuring up new recipes. We'd hold cooking battles, whose carbonara pasta would be tastier, or who would whip up a drunken cherry cake faster. Lisa would just shake her head. Where did you two oddballs come from to torment me? But you know what's the coolest thing? My mother-in-law and I never turned our passion into some elitist snobbery. No fancy restaurants with microscopic portions and three-tier prices. We adored simple, hearty, soulful food. Street shawarma, homemade pies, burgers with fist-sized patties. Anything a normal person wouldn't refuse, really. And then one day, sitting in the kitchen with another culinary magazine and a cup of coffee, I had a thought. What if Eleonora and I went on a gastronomic journey across the country? To travel to different towns and villages, try local delicacies, learn to cook from renowned masters. In short, to combine business with pleasure. When I shared this idea with my mother-in-law, she lit up instantly. Her eyes sparkled, a flush appeared on her cheeks. It was clear that the prospect of cutting loose and embarking on an adventure really inspired her. Lisa, to be fair, was skeptical at first. She worried about how I would be alone with her mother for several weeks. Like, you'll end up tearing each other's throats out over some sauce or onion-cutting method. But Eleonora and I quickly reassured her. After all, we're not kids anymore. We'll figure it out. So it was decided. We bought tickets, booked hotels, mapped out a rough itinerary. Our first destination was New Orleans, the birthplace of jazz and Creole cuisine. Eleonora and I were already drooling at the thought of all those fried oysters, spicy gumbo, and famous beignets. Lisa waved us off, like, do what you want, you weirdos. But she strictly instructed us, no fighting over culinary disagreements. Because she knew us, those crazy perfectionists. And there it was, D-Day. Eleonora and I were packing our suitcases, chatting and laughing nonstop. We made grandiose plans, imagining all the unexplored flavors and aromas that awaited us. Life seemed wonderful and amazing. We felt like we'd returned to childhood, where everything was so vibrant, intoxicating, full of discoveries. Lisa watched our excitement with tender envy. I knew, if it were up to her, she would happily have joined us. But work, responsibilities, plus someone had to look after the house. So we agreed to call each other every evening and report the situation. And I promised to bring back a whole suitcase of souvenirs and goodies. Besides, let's not hide it. I was terribly flattered that out of all possible companions, Eleonora had chosen me. She trusted me, let me into her holy of holies, her passion. I would sooner bite my tongue off than let her down. So yeah, everything fell into place perfectly. A dream, not a vacation. Eleonora was happy. I was on cloud 9. What could go wrong, eh? Oh, if only I had known then. They don't say beware of your wishes for nothing, and be careful with mothers-in-law, especially if you find them so likable. New Orleans greeted us with stifling heat, the enticing calls of street vendors, and the heady aroma of spices in the air. As soon as we stepped off the plane, Eleonora and I exchanged eager smiles. Oh yeah, there would definitely be plenty for two die-hard foodies to indulge in here. First things first, after dropping our bags off at the hotel, we rushed out to wander the city. Or rather, one particular neighborhood, the famous French Quarter, a hub of bars, restaurants, and jazz clubs. Everything around breathed music, revelry, and a kind of unbridled, hedonistic atmosphere. "Damn, this place is awesome!" Eleonora would exclaim every so often, craning her neck to look around. "I feel 20 years younger. I could just break out dancing right here on the pavement." I laughed, watching her sparkling eyes and flushed cheeks. My mother-in-law was like a kid in a candy store. She wanted everything and all at once. She would linger at the stalls with fresh oysters, marveling at the size and luster of the shells. Then she would sniff the fragrant sausages on the grill, pondering what she could make them with at home. Then she would drag me to the bar counters, insisting we sample the signature New Orleans cocktail, the Hurricane. Over another glass of sparkling rum, I secretly admired my companion. Let's face it, Eleanor had always been a striking woman. Statuesque, with a mane of copper-red hair and radiant green eyes, she drew gazes, and when she smiled, she was like a Hollywood star, flashing those perfect white teeth. But now, in the relaxed atmosphere of vacation, she seemed to blossom. She shed a decade, shed all her worries and troubles. I saw a completely different Eleanor before me, uninhibited, playful, devilishly alluring. And I caught her mood, the feverish excitement of the adventures to come. That's how we roamed the city all day, sampling all sorts of delicacies on the go. Eleanor flitted between restaurants and shops, chattering fluently in French with the locals. I could barely keep up with her, constantly wondering, when did she even learn the language? By evening, thoroughly tired out and weighed down by the abundance of food, we remembered the cooking class we had signed up for in advance. A small culinary school in the heart of the French Quarter promised to teach all comers the intricacies of Creole cuisine. Eleanor and I exchanged glances and hurried off together. Who, if not us, should master new culinary heights? The school greeted us with a cozy, homely atmosphere and tantalizing aromas of spices. A charming middle-aged black woman named Odette, the chef instructor, smiled warmly at us. "Welcome, friends. Ready to learn all the secrets of an authentic Creole table?" Eleanor and I nodded enthusiastically. Of course, we couldn't pass up such an opportunity. The next couple of hours flew by in an instant. Eleanor and I, tying on aprons, carefully repeated Odette's every movement. We chopped vegetables, sautéed shrimp, stirred the thick, fragrant gumbo in the pot. We tasted it, closing our eyes in delight, and then rushed to refine it, experiment with it. I kept catching my mother-in-law's mischievous, playful glances. We understood each other without words. Here, amidst the pots and pans, in the dense haze of spices, we were in our element, doing what we loved most in the world. And at one point, I caught myself having a strange thought. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly alive, elated, intoxicated with delight, as if some unknown force had caught me up and was carrying me towards adventure. And by my side was Eleonora, with eyes shining with excitement, with flour on the tip of her nose. And I suddenly thought, damn, I feel so good with her. Easy, free, on the same wavelength, even better than with my wife. Though wait, what am I thinking? I can't think like that, it's wrong. Shaking my head, I banished the unbidden thoughts and refocused on cooking. After all, what difference did it make whether my head was spinning from Creole spices or Eleonora's green eyes? I just had to enjoy the moment, that's all. That's what we came here for, isn't it? After the class, Eleonora and I, proud and satisfied, shared a generous portion of gumbo. And damn the consequences that our stomachs were already full from the abundance of food we'd eaten that day. This was our first culinary trophy, won through sweat and blood. Well, sweat for sure. It was hellishly hot in that kitchen. "Well, partner," Eleonora squinted mischievously, licking her spoon clean, "how did you like our first on-site culinary lessons?" "Bombastic!" I breathed sincerely. "I feel like after this gumbo, life will never be the same." "You bet! Now we're true adherents of Creole cuisine, keepers of sacred knowledge. It's scary to think what Lisa will have to eat when we get back." We roared with laughter, picturing my wife's lengthened face at the sight of yet another bowl of thick, fiery concoction. But we quickly caught ourselves. It's not right to laugh at those who aren't present. And besides, Lisa is sacred to us. She puts up with us, two culinary maniacs. After finishing the gumbo, we reluctantly made our way to the hotel. Tomorrow awaited another eventful day, encounters with unexplored flavors and aromas. And who knows? Maybe some revelations in our relationships too, because I felt that here, far from home and the familiar routine, all barriers were crumbling. and life was presenting the most unexpected surprises. Oh, how little did I realize then just how right I would turn out to be. The next few days flew by in a whirlwind of bright, dizzying kaleidoscope. Eleanor and I crisscrossed New Orleans, not missing a single opportunity to try something new. We peeked into every restaurant, street food stall, gourmet shop. We listened to local stories about traditional dishes, pried out secret ingredients. And I couldn't help but notice how much closer I was growing to my mother-in-law. No, not in that sense, God forbid. It's just, with each passing day, we became more and more kindred souls, you know. We chatted about everything under the sun, joked, exchanged understanding glances, as if we weren't mother-in-law and son-in-law, but bosom buddies who had known each other all our lives. One day, Eleonora suddenly said, looking at me over her glass of iced tea, "You know, Jason, I'm so glad we went away together. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be so alive, you know?" I understood. Oh, how I understood. Because I felt the same thing. Being with Eleonora was like having a second wind. I wanted to laugh, to goof around, to try new things. Hell, I was ready to move mountains, just to see her eyes light up at the sight of yet another culinary masterpiece. And then something happened that completely threw me for a loop. One evening towards the end of our stay in New Orleans, we decided to participate in a local cooking contest. You know, the kind they hold in bars for tourists' amusement. 2 on 2, who can prepare the signature Louisiana dip faster and tastier. Eleonora and I exchanged glances, and without a word, rushed to sign up. Why not? It was a challenge, a chance to prove to everyone, and first of all to ourselves, what we were worth in the kitchen. And off we went. To the cheers and encouragement of the audience, we darted between the tables, grabbing shrimp, peppers, hot sauce. Eleonora chopped onions with the dexterity of a seasoned chef. I whipped the sauce until it splattered. At one point, Eleonora and I reached for the cayenne pepper at the same time, and our hands touched. And it was like a bolt of lightning shot through me at that fleeting contact. Raising my eyes, I met Eleonora's gaze, and saw in it the same thing: surprise, confusion, and heat. My heart skipped a beat, my mouth went dry instantly. "Damn it, Jason, get a grip! Find a time for nonsense! There's a victory at stake here, by the way!" Shaking my head, I threw myself back into cooking with redoubled energy. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Eleonora doing the same. For a while, we seemed to merge into a single organism, acting precisely and in sync. Add spices, stir, taste, adjust, and no unnecessary movements, no words. We understood each other without any telepathy. When the host announced our dip as the best, the hall erupted in applause, and we stood there holding the plump trophy cup, beaming like a pair of freshly polished pennies. Lord, what a triumph! I wanted to freeze that moment and put it on eternal repeat. "Congratulations, partner." Eleonora pecked me on the cheek and hugged me tightly. "I never doubted you." From those words, from her embrace, something sweet fluttered in my chest. I pulled Eleonora closer to me, feeling her hair tickling my nose. And for a moment, just a tiny moment, I imagined, what would it be like to stand like this, embracing every day? To wake up in the same bed, to cook breakfast for each other, to steal kisses when no one was looking. Whoa, stop! I mentally slapped myself upside the head. What are you, completely nuts? What the hell are you thinking about kisses for? Eleonora is your wife's mother, your relatives, for crying out loud. What are you even thinking, you idiot? I abruptly pulled away, mumbling something about being tired and stuffy, and I fled in cowardly fashion, hid like the last fool. I understood, of course, that I was acting like an idiot, that sooner or later I would have to face the truth, but I just couldn't talk about it right then. It was too scary, too wrong. Locking myself in a stall, I rested my forehead against the door and groaned. What the hell is this? How could I have gotten myself into such a mess, to fall head over heels for my own mother-in-law, my wife's mother? It's a total disaster. We've arrived. I might as well cross myself and become a monk. But even now, tormented by guilt and self-flagellation, I couldn't stop thinking about Eleonora, about her radiant eyes, her warm smile, the way she laughed when I clumsily joked. How passionately she talked about different cooking techniques, waving her arms around. Lord, why does everything have to be so complicated? Why can't we just love? After standing in the restroom for about 10 minutes, I finally pulled myself together and returned to the hall. Eleonora sat over a cooled cup of coffee, pensively gazing out the window. Seeing me, she started and forced a smile. "Everything okay, Jason? You look pale." I shook my head, plopping down in the chair across from her. "It's fine. Sorry, my stomach just cramped up a bit. I must have overeaten." My mother-in-law squinted distrustfully but didn't insist. She just patted my hand lightly and said with a kind of bitter resignation, "Well, it happens. Too many impressions for one day, huh? Maybe we should head back to the hotel, rest?" I nodded in relief. "Yeah, the hotel. That was a great idea. There I could retreat to my room, shut myself in and really think about what was going on in my head, and in my heart, come to that." After settling the bill, we rode back to the hotel in silence. The entire way, an oppressive silence reigned. Eleonora stared out the window. I nervously drummed my fingers on the steering wheel. Yeah, not quite the fun evening we had expected. Already in the lobby, as we were saying goodbye, Eleonora suddenly turned to me. Such anguish, such longing swam in her eyes that my heart clenched. "You know, Jason, maybe we should go home early. Say something happened. I don't know. We missed Lisa, for example." I froze, feeling a cold wave wash over my spine. Go home? Now? But we still had so many places left to visit. And then I just couldn't. I couldn't just cut this journey short like that, admitting defeat. To run away from myself, from what was happening inside me. "No," I rasped, shaking my head. "No, Eleonora, we can't do that. We planned for this. We dreamed about it. We have to see it through to the end." She looked at me intently, as if trying to read something in my eyes. Then she smiled sadly and nodded. "You're right. It would be foolish to abandon everything halfway. Well, until tomorrow then?" "Until tomorrow," I echoed, and we parted for our rooms. But something inside me writhed and screamed, "No, don't go. Stay. Let's talk. Let's figure this out once and for all, however painful and scary it may be." But I remained silent. I just watched as the elevator door closed behind Eleonora, and I felt something inexorable looming, thickening around us, something inevitable and enormous like a tsunami. And when that wave crashed over us, it would be all over. The next few days, Eleanor and I made a concerted effort to pretend that everything was fine. We strolled around the city, laughed, chatted as if nothing had happened. But we both understood. Something had changed irreversibly. A tension hung between us, thick and viscous, like the molasses they add to just about every dish here. We tried not to be alone together for too long. We mostly went to crowded places, got lost in the crowds, as if we were afraid that if we stopped, looked into each other's eyes, the dam would burst, and something would come gushing out that we couldn't stop or control, and I was sinking deeper. I caught every glance from Eleonora, every gesture and sigh of hers, and I realized I was a goner. I had fallen head over heels like a lovesick boy. For my own mother-in-law, damn her, for a woman old enough to be my mother. My God, Freud would envy such a case study. One day we went to a plantation outside the city. The owners promised authentic Louisiana cuisine and the famous bananas Foster for dessert. I was already drooling at the thought of that flaming rum on the skillet. Though, to be honest, it wasn't just the rum that was heating up my insides. The plantation was beautiful. Neat rows of sugarcane, an imposing colonial-style mansion. Eleonora and I strolled along the paths, half listening to the guide's story about the sugarcane production process. But we kept exchanging glances, smiling shyly at each other. Like teenagers on a first date, I swear. After the tour, we were invited into the dining room. The plump Creole woman who owned the plantation, dressed in a colorful dress, was cooking our lunch herself. I hovered around the stove, peering into pots and inhaling the aromas with delight. I was ready to carry this woman in my arms. It smelled so mind-bogglingly delicious. And then Eleonora offered to help with the dessert. She said the signature bananas Foster was a family recipe of ours. We knew all the secrets and nuances. The hostess broke into a smile and nodded. "Of course, I'll be happy to have you help." We rolled up our sleeves and stood at the stove. Eleonora sliced the bananas. I stirred the sauce. A familiar task. We'd done it 100 times before. But now every movement seemed tense, significant, as if we weren't making dessert, but performing some sacred ritual. At one point, Eleonora reached for the brown sugar, and she brushed against my shoulder, engulfing me in heat even through the fabric of my shirt. I froze, afraid to breathe, and she froze too, looking at me with huge, darkened eyes, her pupils dilated, a flush played on her cheekbones. "Jason," it escaped her lips, hoarsely, almost pleadingly. "Jason, And I couldn't take it anymore. To hell with it all. Propriety, morality, family ties. I took 2 steps towards Eleanor, framed her face with my palms. I crushed my lips against her pliant mouth, devouring, ravaging. She gasped, went limp in my arms. Then, with the same ferocity, she wound her arms around my neck, pulling me even closer. We kissed like madmen, biting, moaning, tangling in our clothes. We even forgot where we were. It was lucky the hostess discreetly stepped out, leaving us alone. Sweeping Eleanor up into my arms, I sat her down on the table. I drew her into a whirlwind of intoxicating kisses and caresses, not even noticing as we knocked the dishes to the floor. The whole world ceased to exist. Only our feverish embraces and frantic whispers remained. My mind completely shut off, giving way to primal passion. We did it right there, on the kitchen table, forgetting everything else in the world. Only our unbridled, unstoppable desire mattered. We didn't care that someone might walk in at any moment, that we were making an irreparable mistake. Now there was only the 2 of us, hungry, consumed by passion. When it was all over, we lay there for a long time, coming back to ourselves. Eleanor buried her face in my shoulder. I stroked her tousled hair. My head was empty and ringing. No thoughts, no regrets, only a sated, satisfied calm. "What have we done, Jason?" Eleanor asked hoarsely, not raising her head. "God, what's going to happen now?" I pulled her closer to me, kissing the top of her head. "I don't know. Truly, I don't know. Let's just try to live in the present, okay? We'll figure everything out when we get back." She sighed heavily and nodded. Then she raised tired, dimmed eyes to me. "Only Lisa must never find out. Under no circumstances, it would kill her." I squeezed my eyes shut, fighting the nausea rising in my throat. Lisa. God, how ashamed I felt. What kind of person was I? To have slept with my own mother-in-law, my wife's best friend, to have destroyed everything we had. Trust, respect. For what? A moment of weakness? A flare of lust? "She won't find out," I promised in a hollow voice. We'll think of something." Getting dressed, we silently cleaned up the mess in the kitchen. It was a good thing we thought to lay out a tablecloth before. We told the hostess that Eleanor had a sudden migraine attack. We apologized, said we'd better go rest. The entire way back, we didn't utter a word. We sat on tenterhooks, deliberately avoiding looking at each other. The only reminders of what had happened were Eleanor's kiss-swollen lower lip and the faint marks from my nails on my shoulders. At the hotel, we retreated to our separate rooms. We agreed not to mention what had transpired for now, to pretend nothing had happened, to act as if we were just mildly flirting, nothing serious. Though it was hard to believe that. The remaining days in New Orleans, Eleanor and I spent like we were on a powder keg. We smiled, joked, pretended everything was fine. But as soon as we were alone, the pretense fell away like a husk. Our hands instinctively reached to embrace, our lips burned with the thirst for kisses. We really tried to restrain ourselves. We drowned out the call of our hearts with the arguments of reason. But can you overcome what is stronger than you? That which sweeps away all barriers and conventions. We slipped a couple of times, furtively, convulsively, as if stealing moments of intimacy from ourselves. Hurried, ravenous caresses in a dark alleyway we happened to turn into. Feverish kisses in a restaurant restroom where we went to have dinner. Like teenagers, I swear. Like Romeo and Juliet, only set against the backdrop of modern-day New Orleans. And then the day of our departure arrived. It was time to return home, to our familiar lives. To Lisa, who was waiting for us, oblivious to the passions raging under her nose. I was packing my suitcase and thinking, here it is, the end of our fairy tale, our mad romance. Now we'll go back home and become who we were before. Mother-in-law and son-in-law, nothing more. And whatever flared between us will forever remain here, in the city of jazz and Creole cuisine. In the airport lounge, I sat down next to Eleanor. I looked at her, haggard, subdued. My heart clenched with tenderness and guilt simultaneously. "Eleanor, listen." "No, Jason," she cut me off, smiling sadly. "Let's not. It's all clear anyway." And what is? I asked softly, looking into her eyes. That all of this was a mistake, a magical, intoxicating mistake, but we can't afford it. Not in this life. I swallowed the lump that rose in my throat. I knew Eleonora was right. Our affair would lead nowhere good. It would only destroy families, betray the trust of our loved ones, and it wasn't worth it. But you know, my mother-in-law suddenly added, covering my hand with hers, I don't regret anything. Really. It was the best thing that's happened to me in years. It was like I returned to my youth for a moment, when anything seemed possible. She squeezed my fingers, and I felt tears prick my eyes. Good Lord, why did everything have to be so complicated? Why couldn't love, just once in a lifetime, be simple and right? Me too, I forced out. Me too. I don't regret anything. I just hope Lisa never finds out. She won't find out, Eleonora said firmly. We'll act as usual, as if nothing happened. And what was between us, let it stay here, in New Orleans. I nodded slowly. Yes, that would be right. To pretend that nothing had changed, that our trip was just an adventure, a fun escapade for two food lovers, no more than that. On the plane, we sat apart, me by the window, Eleonora across the aisle. I watched the clouds drift by below and thought, that's it, the end of our story, our crazy romance, the one that was born in the heat of culinary passion and had no right to exist in real life. But you know what's most surprising? I really didn't feel pangs of guilt, as if what had happened between us wasn't a betrayal, a deception, but something right, something real, even if it was fleeting, like a flash of light in the night. Maybe in another life, in another reality, Eleonora and I would have had a chance. We could have been together without hiding, without pretending, to love each other openly, without looking back at others' opinions, to cook in the same kitchen, to wake up in the same bed. Isn't that happiness? But here and now, that happiness was denied us. Too much divided us. Age, family ties, moral principles, and we made the only right decision, to let go, to forget, to return to our familiar lives, even if it made our hearts ache and our souls yearn. At the airport, Lisa greeted us, joyful, missing us. She flung herself around my neck, peppering my cheeks with kisses, and I stood there like a statue, awkwardly patting her back. And I tried not to look at Eleonora, who pretended to be engrossed in rummaging through her purse. At home, over dinner, my wife chattered nonstop, asking how the trip was, what impressions we had. Eleonora and I responded brightly, interrupting each other. We recounted amusing incidents, shared recipes, only for some reason, we didn't breathe a word about what had happened between us, as if that part of the journey had never existed at all. After dinner, Eleonora was getting ready to leave. She hugged her daughter tightly in farewell, then turned to me. I froze, unsure how to behave. A handshake? A perfunctory peck on the cheek? Lord, we'd ventured into such depths of intimacy that these formalities now seemed simply laughable. But my mother-in-law only smiled softly and held out her hand to me. I carefully squeezed her fingers, looked into her eyes. They swam with the same longing, the same regret that was tearing me apart inside. But aloud, we both only uttered the usual, "Goodbye, see you later." And what else can you say in such a situation? "I love you. I can't live without you." Or, "Thanks for the sex, it was great." "No thanks, I'll pass. We're adults, and we've made an adult decision. We've cut off the past, buried our forbidden passion. It will be better that way for everyone." In the bedroom, when Lisa and I were alone, I hugged my wife and buried my nose in her hair. I inhaled her familiar, welcoming scent. Lisa cooed something, snuggling up to me, and I stood there with my eyes squeezed shut, wishing I could disappear into the ground. No, I didn't regret anything. That crazy week in New Orleans would forever stay with me, like a sweet, viscous memory, like a sip of another parallel life, where everything could have been different. But here and now, I had my own reality, a beloved wife, a familiar routine, the measured flow of days. And Eleonora? Well, to her, I would forever remain a son-in-law, a close friend to chat with about cooking and new recipes, nothing more. So yes, life went on. Eleanor and I occasionally called each other, politely inquired about each other's affairs. But that sparkling, bright feeling that had flared between us, it remained there, in the city of jazz. Because there was no place for it here, alas. You know, I never did ask Eleanor if she regretted anything. I was afraid to hear the answer, I suppose. I was a coward until the end. And now I think, to hell with it. The main thing is that we had that. If only for a few days, if only furtively and in snatches. But we had it. And someday, many years from now, looking back on my life, I'll remember this episode. I'll smile nostalgically, sigh, and I'll say to myself, it was cool, old man, the best adventure of your life. Because in the end, it's for such vivid flashes that it's worth living, even if they scorch and cause pain. But now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go cook some gumbo. Eleanor sent a new recipe the other day. It would be a sin not to try it. Only my hands are shaking for some reason. I can't seem to peel the shrimp. And my heart aches the damn thing. But we'll get through it somehow. After all, it's not the first time. Did you like this story? Let us know in the comments what you liked. Subscribe to our storytelling podcast. Also, don't forget to like and ring the bell so you don't miss more interesting stories. See you soon.